Hello, and welcome to On Good Faith, a program sponsored by the Cape Cod Council of Churches. I am Jonathan Onquist, a retired pastor ordained in the Lutheran Catholic tradition of our Christian faith. Our guest today is a parish pastor representing Cape Kid Meals, the Cape Cod chapter of Blessings in a Backpack. Sounds interesting. Blessings come in small packages and in large packages. I'm going to read a little story from the scripture about such blessing from the 6th chapter of John's Gospel. After Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias, a large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they among so many?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Blessings can come in large packages or in small packages. Left over from 12 baskets full, from little much. Our guest is the Reverend David A. Johnson, the senior pastor at Grace Church in East Dennis. Pastor Johnson, yes. David, can you tell us about your ministry from your Grace Church and also the work you do with Cape Kids and Meals for Kids?
All right, I will show you what we do, and then I'll give you the running start as how we got here.
Super.
There are hungry kids on Cape Cod. We've learned this from schools, and you will learn if you ask the right questions and the right people. I will tell you the 2 Dennis elementary schools are led by some of the finest people I've ever met. They also have wonderful teachers. My wife is one of them, and that's really how we learned. And we found out that there were some kids who would come to school on Monday morning, and during the week they had free breakfast, free lunch, but on the weekends they didn't. And so they'd come home sometimes back to school hungry. And there's a program out of Kentucky called Blessings in a Backpack that one of the social workers at Ezra Baker told me about when I went and asked the question, how can we help? And so we contacted them, and we became the Cape Cod chapter of Blessings in a Backpack.
You contacted Blessings in a Backpack
yes.
in Kentucky?
In Kentucky. Said, tell us about your program. We then went to Fitchburg. There's 2 other programs, one in Brockton and one in Fitchburg. Yeah. We went up to the Fitchburg program, myself and a person who has largely underwritten much of this. Yeah. And we asked them how it worked. They said it works great. And so for this is our 3rd year. You can see that we've got stew and SpaghettiOs and juice and apple and all sorts of stuff, enough for a child to take them through a weekend. So they're coming back and they are not hungry on Monday morning. And but the question is, how did we get here?
Yeah, how did you get there? Because my wife, a teacher too, said that's tough getting into the school system with something like that from outside the system.
I honestly believe God set the table for us.
Okay.
And the way to give you a little bit of my background, I grew up just north of Worcester, the town of Boylston. I grew up going to the Cape every summer. My parents had a little place down here. And when I graduated college, I double majored in business and economics. And I thought I was going to go into either law or construction. And I worked for an architectural firm for 2 years. My best friend's dad ran the company, so I had an in. And I then felt the tug to learn more about my faith. I'd always believed that Christ is exactly who the Bible says. He's the Son of God, and He is Lord and Savior, and He is my Lord and Savior. And I wanted to be able to communicate that and know what I believed better. In college, my faith really grew. And so I said, I'll go off to seminary. And so I did that and went up to Bethel Seminary in Minnesota and then Gordon Conwell. While I was at Gordon Conwell, there was a church called Grace Chapel in Lexington who was actually looking for somebody who had construction background because they were going to build a larger complex. Yeah. And so they hired me as clerk of the works because they bought 100 acres someplace.
Talk about fitting a puzzle. Well,
it is such a puzzle. And so as I'm finishing seminary, I'm working at Grace Chapel, and they needed a college minister. And so they offered me, as I'm finishing up, the college and young adults and singles ministry. And the real difficulty was they wanted a 3-year commitment. Yeah. But my wife and I prayed about it, and we said, sure. We actually stayed 13.
13 years.
While doing that, Grace had this interesting thing of sending international teams all over the world. Ecuador, Iceland, France. When we took teams of young people all over the world.
Lay people from the church
yes.
going on these missions.
Yep. Largely college students, young adults, and so I led a bunch of these things. Well, at the end of those 13 years, we had felt a tug for something new, and I took a job as a development director for an international ministry that did economic development in the post-communist world, Central and Eastern Europe.
After the wall was down.
Yeah, the wall had come down. All sorts of American dollars ran in there to build churches and seminaries, but they couldn't afford to keep the lights on.
You mean once the churches were built?
Once the churches were built, because the whole economic structure of the post-communist world collapsed. It wasn't just a political system. It was judicial and economic and everything. And so we did microfinancing and business training amongst Christian entrepreneurs through Central and Eastern Europe. And while I was doing that, I found out there was a little church in East Dennis, because we were then living on the Cape, that needed a pastor. And so I did, for the first year, I worked for Integra, and I started pastoring the church.
Integra, just mentioned that. Now,
yes.
Integra is Identifit?
Yes, that is the organization I was working for in Central and Eastern Europe. And I was flying over there 4, 5, 6 times a year. And so when I came and started at Grace, I did the 2 of them together for the first year. I resigned from the development position I had, but I stayed on their board, Integra's board, and I kept traveling for them occasionally. And just got into the routine of now taking people from East Dennis to, we've built 5 small churches in the Dominican Republic. I've taken 5 teams to Haiti since the earthquake. We've been to Ecuador and other places, Guatemala a couple times. Well, on one of those trips, about 5 or 6 years ago, one of my elders, a very wise man, but a little direct, said, Pastor, we seem to be better at carrying at 5,000 miles than we are at 5 miles. Yeah. And it was one of those things that just went bang. And just, because I had been learning, my wife was a teacher in the schools, that there were some real needs in this town, especially amongst children. And so I said, you know what? You're right, we are. We fly in, we do some good work, and we fly back out. But what are we doing here? And so I went to some of the librarians, I went to a few different people in town, and I asked, what are the needs here? And when you live over at Quivett Neck, which is next to Seswood Harbor, I mean, it's kind of a wealthy little enclave. Yeah. But there are other parts of this town, other parts of Cape Cod, that are not, quite so well-to-do. And, what I would call the working poor, people who work hard and just, there's a cyclical economy on Cape Cod. You can have 3 jobs in the summer, but about this time they're starting to roll up the sidewalks. And unemployment starts to spike, and people who had 3 jobs may be lucky to have 1 part-time one. And the needs start to rise. So when you ask good people good questions, you get good answers. And so
Who
I
did
went-
you ask? Who did you ask?
I
Specifically?
asked the
Teachers?
the social workers
Social
at the two schools, at Wixon and at Ezra Baker.
And you picked them because, one, your wife was teaching at one of them.
Yes, and they serve as adjustment count, and they have their hands on the pulse of. Now, I went through the principals as well, and they were. There was no reluctance whatsoever. These schools are so interested in caring for their kids, and if as long as we came in there with the integrity to say we're just here to care, they welcomed us.
So well, there are probably some questions, but I mean, they welcomed you to come in and offer this food.
Tanya Rosa, who was the social worker over at Ezra Baker, actually knew about Blessings in a Backpack before I did.
And that was oriented out of Kentucky.
It's a national program out of Kentucky. It's a lot in the South, and it does exactly that: weekend food for kids who they're usually on the free lunch, free breakfast program, so they're taken care of during the week.
At
but
school.
But yes,
Yeah.
and I have a friend who is a teacher at one of the schools, and I want to try to keep everybody as anonymous as I can. But first period, this child came up to him, and she had a blue tongue. And he goes, "Hey, what's up?" She goes, "Oh, Mommy and I ran out of our food bag food. So all we had was one piece of bread and some Kool-Aid. So I told Mommy I didn't like toast, and I just had the packet of Kool-Aid, and she had the toast." That's in our town.
Yeah.
Okay, and you talk to Priscilla Bellarosa from Wixon, or Tanya Rosa, or any number of the teachers. They're not just teaching; they are caring, and they know these stories. And once they share those stories and they grab hold of your heart, we said, you know what? Let's find something we can do.
So they said, all right, you can do this.
Oh, yeah.
How did you start doing it? What did you do with the food? Came what, donations from your members or from anybody that would donate? Or
The first year, we just went shopping at BJ's,
yeah,
and we would buy what we thought was, something that was appropriate. We wanted it to be fun. I'm a father of 3 boys,
Yeah.
and so it was things that I would have wanted my kids to eat over the weekend. And they recommended 10 things. We actually squeezed it up to 14 or 15 things. One of the things that the social worker said, "Is there any way you can put some fresh fruit in these?" And so we do an
Great.
apple and orange.
super.
And we tried a banana once. Didn't
No
work.
good.
They smushed. But and so
Bananas will do that, yes.
yeah. So we've been. This is our 3rd year doing it.
Wow, it's a quite ministry of your church, right?
Yes, it
The
is.
volunteers are all from
All from the church.
Grace Church.
Our
And do they
prayer
get-
meeting on Thursday night is at the end of prayer meeting. We have these bins lined up with all the food, and we kind of basically reverse trick or treating.
Yeah.
We fill these
Fill the
bags,
bags.
and this year there'll be 127 bags a week.
And you deliver the bags to the
To the
schools.
Friday mornings between 9 and 9:30. I'm at one school, and then I drive straight to the next school, and I'm in and out of the building within a minute.
Now, it sounds wonderful, exciting, and beautiful ministry. I wonder about, I'm imagining myself as a 3rd grader,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm watching my friend Joe, who I didn't know didn't have much money,
Yeah.
but Joe gets a special bag of food, and I didn't. How does that, I mean, that's something I think kids are going to be thinking, why did Joe get that bag of food? I didn't get it.
That is where the wisdom of the administrators at the schools, they handle such things. They do it with great dignity.
Good.
And it's right at the end of the day as the kids are leaving, and they give it to them and on their way.
They just give it to the kids that are part of the
Uh-huh.
program for the. in
They
need.
have mapped out we have asked them, they said, we're limited in what we can do. And so this is not for the kids for whom it would be nice. This is for the kids for whom it is necessary.
Necessary.
And they have made that distinction for us. And so it's 40 at one school and 50 at the other. Last year it was 55 and 40. And then it's kind of a contagious movement because there are 4 schools in Bourne Sandwich that have just started this year. And there's a school in Barnstable that packs with us, that we pack and they take things. And Brewster, there's a small church in Brewster that says that feed
gonna do the same thing.
13 kids. They come and pack with us because they don't have a building. And so we are the packing center for those.
Now, but you
schools.
consider yourself still part of that group from Kentucky.
Absolutely. We're
Part of
under,
that.
we're under
That's
their
the-
umbrella.
And what is that umbrella? Is it
That's
just the name?
basically, they, it's their vision, and so that they have a website where you can make donations on behalf of Cape Kid Meals
Yeah.
through Blessings in a Backpack in Kentucky. They have a brilliant idea. There's a goodwill, and there's almost a safety of a school saying, who's this church? But they can say, okay, there's a national organization that
Yeah.
have chapters all over the
Yeah.
country.
That's what.
And we want to, I would like people to feel as safe and comfortable with what we're doing as possible.
That's exciting, and as you said, I mean, I think it's so important for you to be able to get into the school system to do that, but there are so many hoops and ladders to run through to make it legal. And having done that as you did is wonderful, and you're teaching other groups of people to be able to do the same thing?
We've come by invitation.
Yeah.
And so it's, they set the rules, and we abide by, what they say. There is, as you can see, it is a plain plastic
Yeah,
bag.
yeah, yeah.
There is no literature, there's no proselytizing. It says EB41. This is for Ezra Baker 41.
Okay.
And this is the 41st child of that, and I don't know who that is. I don't know who any of these kids are.
Have you heard?
And they don't know us.
Have you heard responses from the kids or the parents of kids? Has there been a connection made, no matter how subtle?
I had a, you always wonder, is
Yeah.
this, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because it's 35 weeks that we do this. And as I tell people, we have to underpromise and overdeliver.
Yeah.
If we say we will be there every Friday, if we miss one of them, if we miss 1 out of 35, we failed.
Yeah.
Because I cannot have a bunch of kids waiting for these things and they don't show. And so for 3 years, we have not missed a week. For instance, this Friday, there is Veterans Day.
Right.
So we are going to pack tomorrow to deliver Thursday.
Thursday.
If we look ahead and we see that there's going to be a snowy Thursday and Friday, we'll pack on Tuesday, get them there Wednesday. And
So it's a very alive, a pulsating activity that your church is involved in. It's a ministry that's really functions because people are there serving.
it is relentless.
Yeah.
It is labor intensive. But again, as I equate it to, I have 3 boys.
Yeah.
I fed them yesterday. They want to eat again today. And so that's when you work with kids. But there was one story. I was at a store. I won't say which one. And this was back when we were shopping for everything. And we have connected with the Boston Food Bank, and we get somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2
Yeah.
of what we're now doing through the Boston Food Bank. Still, we shop for about half it. But you go to a store and you get 80 cans of SpaghettiOs. The checkout person is going,
What are you doing?
What are you doing? And I said, well, there's this little program. And the girl behind the counter looks up at me and goes, that's you?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. She goes, I have 3 kids in the schools. He
And they
goes,
benefit from it.
and they all get a bag. I said, is it working for you? She goes, it's working great.
Beautiful.
That's
That's the kind of story we have to hear. That's
that made my day.
David, that's exciting.
So
And you sound like you're thrilled with what's going on with that, and it will
I am.
continue to go on. And how are you funded out of the pockets of
We
your
are.
members, or but people can donate to Blessings in a Backpack in Kentucky?
Yep.
And it comes. And do financial resources come to you from Kentucky, or?
what they will do is we will buy the food, send receipts to Kentucky. They will take those receipts and then reimburse us so that we can buy again. So
Oh,
that's
good.
So it's
And so is that if you're going to be funding, you're going to be want to give some money to support this
Yep.
Blessings in a Backpack.
Yep.
You would send your money to you or to Kentucky.
you can do either one, either Blessings in a Backpack, and then mark on it for Cape Kid Meals,
Yeah.
Cape Kid Meals Dennis, because there are now several chapters,
Yeah.
or you can do it to Grace Church CKM, Cape Kid Meals, and that will go straight in. everything, nothing goes to the church. As a matter of
That's
fact,
great.
the church is paying for gas and labor and all of that.
That's what so many people need to hear, because everybody's suspicious of who's already cutting some corners somewhere and getting some financial benefit from it, and there's
Nothing.
not happening. That's wonderful. God bless for that effort. What other efforts have you been in? And you've got quite a career of social service like that, and I know this is a vibrant thing that's going on here at the Cape and through the Kentucky connection. But what are other things? You told me before the show started about the work in the old Soviet Union.
Well, again, we specialized in starting businesses, but once we got there, we had a secondary specialty called Women at Risk, and that was finding women. When the wall came down, a woman who was 35 years old was considered untrainable for the new economy. And so there were these women with
In where, Romania or something?
Romania, Bulgaria,
Yeah.
even Hungary.
They were considered untrainable for the new economy.
For the new economy. And I will brag about a friend of mine.
Good.
Her name is Florica Karakesh. Florica she's Romanian, she grew up in Oradea. Her husband was a world-class cellist, and they were offered, when the wall came down, they were offered to come to the States or Canada, and they turned it down. They said, we want to stay and work with our people. Her husband went on a tour of Europe and decided to come home a day early. He had a concert in Vienna, and I know this road, I've driven it many times, from Vienna to Budapest. Wonderful highways between Vienna and Budapest, but you go east of Budapest and it's the Wild West. Yeah. It's nasty little windy roads. And he must have fallen asleep in the middle of the night and crossed the line and hit a truck head first. So he was killed instantly. So she was left with 3 small kids. The only job she could find was, she was a mechanical engineer by training, and the only job she could find was teaching the recorder at a school. She was about to lose that job when we at Integra found out about her, and we needed a director for our micro-lending project in Oradea, Romania.
In Romania.
And so I was there when we hired Florica. Well, that chapter did so well. The mayor of her town, Oradea, Oradea, by the way, it was the capital of Transylvania. If you want to just, people get a kick out of that.
Okay.
Transylvania, we know it.
It's a real place, I know.
It is a real place. It means trans means through.
Yeah.
Silvan means forest.
Yeah.
It's the land through the forest. So it sounds real pretty, but we think of all that. Well, that chapter did so well that the mayor of Oradea asked her if she could part-time come on her staff for women's affair in that town. She went from there to be vice mayor. She has now been elected to the Parliament of Romania.
What a fantastic story. And her love of service, really, is inspired by her faith? Is she a person of great faith?
Person of great faith. Even under communism, she was a believer. And in Ceausescu's Romania, Nicolae Ceausescu was one of the nastier folks out there when it came to faith.
Yeah.
And she was a believer and faced some persecution for it. But she and her husband, she has since remarried. Her next husband's a wonderful man. They've had another child together. And they have a beautiful family. And but she is now making a difference in the Romanian parliament.
Now, who is she? Is she the organization? Is that the?
That was with Integra.
Integra.
She ran the micro-lending Women at Risk project for Integra in Romania.
And Integra is still an active.
Yes, it is. Yes.
And its main job is what?
Entrepreneurship training, and in the post-communist world, and micro-lending. We would help people write business plans, start small businesses in places where there was economic catastrophe. Yeah. They would start these businesses, then we give them the money to actually start it, and we started loan funds.
Have you been able to see any successes in the development of those nation states? I mean, really, has there been a positive effect?
Yes.
More than just individually?
Well, let me tell you about a friend of mine that my children did not like at all. His name was Joseph Scheiben, and he lived in Slovakia. And Joseph was an engineer, and after communism, he would go to the factory where he's owned by the state, and he would do nothing, days after days. He was a youth pastor in his church, and he finally just said, my integrity will not let me do this. He goes, my parents have a little farm. I'm going to try to raise rabbits. Well, we gave him a loan to, what he did is he started to do
Integra gave him a loan.
gave him a loan, and we helped him write a business plan. And what he did is he started a cooperative with 28 other farms around him. And it just so happens that as that was happening, the mad cow thing was hitting in England and Europe, and suddenly Switzerland and France cannot buy enough rabbits. And so he is exporting 5,000, well, and they breed like rabbits. So he was exporting 5,000 rabbits a month. And his business is just booming. Well, because they couldn't get decent rabbit food, he started a factory that makes rabbit food. He is now a major player.
It's amazing, David. Some of the stories you can tell of what you have done with your ministries in the Integra and also with backpacks here. It's just wonderful, and that mission and that intensity in your heart to continue doing this. God bless you and keep up the good work. And thank you very much for being with us today and on Good Faith. I always close with something, and this kind of fits about love, because I think love is the source of what we're about. Again, a reading from Mary Oliver, Logos. She writes this: why wonder about the loaves and the fishes? Remember we talked about the 5,000. Why wonder about the loaves and the fishes? If you say the right words, the wine expands. If you say them with love and the felt ferocity of that love and the felt necessity of that love, the fish explode into many. Imagine him speaking, and don't worry about what is reality or what is plain or what is mysterious. If you were there, it was all those things. If you can imagine it, it is all those things. Eat, drink, be happy, accept the miracle, accept too each spoken word spoken with love. And I think the work that your ministries do is all spoken with love, and that is a word that needs to be heard and felt by all of us. Amen. I hope you enjoyed our program today, and I thank you for being with us, and on Good Faith. Peace to you.